So yeah, so this is just a bit of a workshop. Essentially, it's just me. I'm just going to essentially just, audio book version of the help file. So play along at home. We'll sort of work this out as we go. So introduction. So I'm Bart. I work for the CSIRO in Canberra. So that's our Australian government scientific arm. So we help out do some science and bits and pieces, and we help out NASA and JPL every so often when they want help. And we pretend we know what we're doing, kind of like what I'm doing right now. Making the most of swiftDialog. So that's the first version that came out. Was very, very dodgy and used the FSF symbol that Apple says don't use. So I didn't see that little asterisk when they bring that out. So this, who's this for? So I presume we're all smart people here, so we all know how to use Bash and stuff like that. So if there's anyone here that doesn't know how to use Bash, yep, great. We're not using Python.
People claim that they do apply.
That's right. You're not using Bash, you're using Z Shell. So what I'll do is I've got a bit of an intro. I'll skip through most of all that sort of stuff, but we'll see how we go. So we'll go through, who's it for, what it does, what it doesn't do. And feel free to yell out at any time and ask me a question. It's not a problem at all. So the latest version of swiftDialog is currently 2.5. I think when I wrote this, the version was 2.4, so there's no 2.5 content in here, but we can cover that if we really want to. macOS 12 should work, but according to latest issues that have been coming through, apparently there's a couple of issues, so preferably on a newer version of macOS if you can, and pick your editor of choice if you want to play along at home. So some really basic Bash fundamentals. I'm going to use Bash just because it's the lowest common denominator for this kind of stuff, but you can use, Z Shell fundamentals, here we go. So basic logic, so we're just going to be used, if, where, case loops, that kind of stuff. They look like that. For loops, a lot of these get used, so especially in sort of complex workflows that we're going to be doing. Case is really valuable, obviously. Capturing output is probably going to be the more interesting thing that people are going to want to use. So there's two types. One is obviously the output from forms, and the other one is the capturing the exit code. So generally, we'll just go, results equals, whatever. You can also throw it in the background, just stick an ampersand at the end. You might want to do some stuff taking care of the PID that's running under, just so you can quit it out, although we've got a command file, so probably just send a quit command to the command file. We can get to that a bit later on as well. Wouldn't Python be easier? Probably, especially when it comes to dealing with JSON, although Sequoia, JQ, is in there by default, which is really nice, so no more JXA stuff. I know that's really awesome, but yeah, it's kind of a bit annoying, especially in Bash. But yeah, you can use whatever language you want to use. So if you're more comfortable in Python, feel free to use Python. I'm just going to use Bash up here. The command line. So there is swiftDialog's got built-in help. Arguments can come in either via the command line, or we can pass it in with a JSON file. So we've got some formatted JSON. The JSON normally, by default, will just follow whatever the command line argument will be, although there's some other formatting for some more complex things that we can build out lists and bits and pieces like that. Argument modifiers is kind of like something that started out as a bit of a hacky thing and has somehow become a thing. So I've got modifiers on arguments. So I'll sort of explain how that goes. I try to be self-consistent throughout the whole thing. We'll go through that. Executing. swiftDialog is an app bundle, and I do have the user bin local dialog sort of is just a shell shim that calls that. It does a couple of things, tries to make sure that it's running as the user, regardless of the context that you're running it in. If you want to locate the dialog bundle somewhere else, feel free to dive in and change that or edit it or do whatever you want to do. It's not sort of mandatory you have to use it, but most people do. So that's the location of the dialog shim, just so it exists in people's path. So you should just be able to go dialog at the command line and off you go. Dialog's actually the original name, and someone helpfully commented that dialog is not a Googleable name, so thank you, Greg. So it got changed to swiftDialog because it's written in swiftUI. Okay. swiftUI dialog doesn't work that well. User versus root, so generally everyone's management script's going to be running as root. If you're sort of kicking those off from a management framework or whatever. UI apps really don't take too well to running as root. It doesn't pick up things like user preferences for colors or language. So that shim that I wrote tries to make sure that the actual app bundle itself is running as in a user context, so it picks those things up and tries to play nice. I don't have any notes on that. Exit codes, so it started out as a bit of a Jamf helper kind of take. So the initial exit codes are similar to that. So 0 is obviously everything works. Exit code 2, button 2, exit code 3 is button 3. And then I've thrown in some other ones. So if you command quit, you get a separate exit code for that. If the user goes and kills it some other way, you get separate exit code. So you can kind of detect what the user did with the dialog based on how it exits. So if you want to check out a nice example of that, so Trevor Sisok with Big Mac Admin, so baseline's got a few conditions there where it checks to see what the exit code was to take some various action based on that. So you can do stuff like if the user command quits instead of doing what they're supposed to do, then you can complain at them. Output from things like text forms, text boxes and stuff like that, there's kind of two kinds of output. So one is a very generic, key, colon, value, and the other one is we can spit out output in a JSON blob, so you can read it that way if it's easier. So one way is great for just grep the output for the key that you want to use, and then spit out the last field with awk. So it should work for whatever you want to do. Errors and logs, all errors and debug output all go to standard error on the console. So even if you see a whole bunch of, if you're running it interactively, if you see a whole bunch of stuff come out, so that won't appear in your actual results. That's all being piped through to standard error. So I don't have any standard logging at the moment to a file. You can, by all means, pipe that to a file if you want to do that. Otherwise, everything else also ends up in the system log, so you can sort of run a log predicate, whatever it is, and sort of pull some info out of there. So there's a bit of extra logging now in 2.5 than there was in earlier versions, and I'm kind of just building on that, trying to get as much info to you guys as you're sort of like crafting what a dialog looks like, so you sort of know what's going on and fixing issues. Right, all that is essentially just the groundwork for what you need to know for getting started. So we've got kind of like, I've sort of split this up into 3 areas. So one's going to be just real basic dialogues. So that's just throwing something up on the screen and having the user interact with it. The other one, the second, is putting in user data, so having checkboxes and text boxes and stuff like that, and how to sort of create those and get the information out of it and all that sort of stuff. And then the last one is like the juicy stuff where we're sort of playing around with modifying content on the fly and all that sort of fancy stuff. So we'll kind of start basic. I'm happy to skip through as much of this as people are comfortable, or if you want to play along, then we'll do that. So When I ran this at XWorld a few weeks ago, I kind of, essentially it was audio booking the help file. What I'll do instead, so the slides are going to be the exact same as that, so I'm going to have like multiple things for each thing. The command argument format is mostly the same for this kind of stuff, so it's going to be, you know, a title and then a string, or message and a string, or you know, stuff like that, and there's going to be some modifiers. It's going to be mostly self-consistent, so I'm not going to explain each and every single thing, but unless people want me to. But yeah, so I'll try to get through most of the basic stuff, sort of in a reasonable time frame. I'm also wary that I don't want to talk too fast and sort of use all this up in 30 minutes and everyone's done, or maybe that's a good thing, everyone wants to leave. But yeah, I'm also conscious of the fact that I had 3 hours allocated for this last time, and I definitely needed more if I was going to do it at the pace that I ran it there. So title, obviously. So the title bar in here, so it's not a macOS title bar title in the traditional Windows sense. It is just a big fat block of text at the top of the window. So it just accepts just a string of text, so you can have so title whatever you want. So this is where I flip over to here. That's too small, isn't it? Let's make that bigger. How's that? Is that visible?
Yeah.
Cool. So dialog. All the commands, long commands are hyphen hyphen long command. You can also use there's a short command, so you can just do a hyphen T. I like to use the long commands most of the time, so they're a bit more descriptive. Here we go. Hi MDOYVR. And there we go. So title is Hi MDOYVR, so it's pretty much as simple as that. Nothing much else to explain there. Fonts and colours. So with titles, you can update the font and the colour. This is one of the sort of the earlier implementations I was doing here, so it's actually a separate command. So there's a command called title font, and it works a little bit like title font, and then we do the name equals and then font name. So the font name, generally what you want to use, instead of using a font, there's kind of like two sort of types of fonts in macOS. There's your family, which you can then use, you know, bold, heavy, or whatever it is. But if you actually have a look at the fonts in macOS, it actually lists the font as like SF bold or something like that as an actual font, and it's, you kind of want to use the family name, not the actual font itself. So what's a good one? Chalkboard. So yeah, we can update the font, and now we've got a chalkboard font. If you don't know what your fonts are available, there is a command, list fonts, and that will spit out both the pretty much any font that it will find on the system. So you can use that as just a check to see if the font's there. If you do specify a font name and it doesn't exist, it'll just fall back to the standard, which I think is just San Francisco. So yeah, so it's just falling back to San Francisco there. So title font, apart from name, so you can do name, board, and then this is chalkboard. And then you can say colour, which if you are in the US, you can do that, or if you do that, so it'll take both. And then you can take, the colour can be either a name, which is one of the system font names, so you can say like, you know, red, blue, green, teal, all that sort of stuff, or you can pass in a hex value. So if you wanted to pass in hex, you just do a hash and then do something like that. Colour equals blue. Is it going to work? Yeah. So, should do hex. What's a good colour?
Grey. Can you spell grey two different ways too?
Grey. Apparently. Oh no, I've got a hash in there.
FF0000.
Grey. Grey. EY. Oh! Sorry, that's a macOS thing. I'm just picking their colour names. Sorry. Blame Apple.
Someone can see
Fix it before the talk's over.
We could do some live code editing if we really want to. Although I don't want to. Anyway, so yeah, fonts and colours. So that's kind of like a bit of a demonstration though of the sort of like the modular argument sort of format that somehow ended up becoming a thing, where we have property equals as a sort of list of comma separated values essentially is the argument for that thing. So for fonts, it was one of the early ones, so obviously it's two separate commands. So we've got title and title font, message and message font. For more recent commands, I just sort of jam those all into the one command. So it'll normally be argument, and then all the options for that thing are all one big fat CSV. So that's kind of how fonts and colours work. Size, yeah, okay, we'll do size as well, maybe. Size, you can modify the size as well. Size, I think the default size is 40, I think, or 30 or something like that. But we can make it something ridiculous. So we can make the size bigger or smaller. If you make it too small, it'll actually, the size of the title bar at the top is a fixed size. So it'll have a minimum size, but it'll grow to fill out if it needs to. I think that's it for a title, I think, is it? Fonts, colours, size. Yeah. So message, very much the same. So we've got message, just takes a string of text. Message font works exactly the same way as title font did. So you can set the font, or you can set the, you can't. So with message, I'm using a markdown library called markdown UI. When it switched over from version 1 of that library to version 2, the way that it renders markdown kind of changed. So changing the font type is a bit more difficult and it kind of doesn't really work anymore in the current version of markdown UI. You should be able to affect the colors still, but yeah, one of the things I want to do is actually want to get away from using that library. So the only really reason I use it was because back in when I released this, running on Big Sur, the default markdown support in swiftUI was a little bit limited, so I'm using a third-party library. That's getting a lot better, so hopefully once I start dropping older versions of macOS, I can start using the built-in swiftUI markdown, and things get a little bit better. So I'm going to leave it there for now, but message can take obviously a string of text at the command line. It can also take a markdown document, so if you pass in a file which is a .md, it will just read that in and it can render it straight to there as well. So general formatting rules with markdown work, so bolds, underlines, italics, headings, all that sort of stuff, code blocks, tables, all that sort of cool stuff works. What doesn't work is inline images from local sources. So you can't, and that's a limitation with the framework that I'm using. You can do inline images if it's from a HTTP source, but if you try to point it to a local file, it won't work. So that's just a bit of a gotcha, and it's probably the most common thing that comes up with sort of messaging formats. So just something to be aware of. Fonts and colours I spoke about, and size works about the same. So do I have a... Yeah, so I've got so if I go dialog, there's just a grabbing a markdown file. So it's just a test one that I've got. So yeah, it'll pull that in, and it starts formatting it based on the contents of that markdown. That's a little bit small. If I wanted to make it bigger, I can go. I can't remember when I put in resizable. I think there might be a 2.5 thing, but resizable now means I can just drag it, make it bigger. So yeah, so it's just a general sort of demonstration of just using a markdown document as the contents of the message. So rather than type in a big fat long string and have that hit some character limit that you've got on the command line, which I have hit, that's a couple of times. It's a lot easier just to pump it in that way. Size, a little bit same as before, I think. I don't know if this is going to work. Message font. Size equals, let's make it big, small. Let's make it small, see what happens. There we go. Just in case you wanted, so this is your acceptable use policy. If you agree to that, then you owe me all your money. So size works. I don't know if it will colour work. O equals green. There we go. So colour works. If you put in for standard text, that's going to work because Markdown doesn't really have any concept of colours. If you're using a block quote or code backticks or anything like that, they get formatted as their own colour block. So a code block will be rendered, as a code block, and a block quote will be rendered with its own sort of like colour formatting. So because I'm not setting a colour format for the actual text itself, that should work. I don't think the one thing that won't work is the actual font. So I don't think if we go, let's take out size 5 for starters. This might work. We'll see how we go. Name equals. I'm only using chalkboard because that's the one I remember because it's stupid. Yeah, so font name doesn't work at the moment, and that's just a limitation with the current Markdown renderer. While I've actually got this up, I'll probably explain with the way that text blocks get rendered in Markdown. Internally, each block has been rendered as its own view. So, and SwiftUI has got this really great feature / limitation that you can't copy text across views. So if I want to select all this text, I can't, because I can only select the text within that one view. So behind the scenes, Markdown UI is actually creating a separate view for that block, and it's creating a separate view for the next one, and then a separate view. Like every time I change a type or a paragraph or anything like that, it's going to render it as a different thing. So I don't know. I think I've put in a feature request to see if SwiftUI can actually have select across views. I don't know how much of a pain in the ass it's going to be for Apple behind the scenes, but yeah. So if you put in a big block of text and say, "Hey, copy and paste this thing," just be aware that even if it crosses a paragraph boundary, it's not going to be selectable across both. So something to be aware of. So the other main interactive thing is buttons. Pretty simple. We've got the default button, which has been popping up, is just an OK button. I've got some language support in there for, I think I've got French, German, Danish, Dutch, Spanish. Might be the only languages I've got in there. So otherwise it'll just default to English OK. Obviously it's a free text form, so you can put in whatever you want. One of the things that sort of annoyed me when I was doing back in the Jamf Alpha days was I wanted some very descriptive text in my button. So I wrote in button 1 text. Hi there. So you can have a text button for as big as you want. So it'll actually expand to fill the entire width of the window if you let it, or until it hits the next button. So, and then it will start truncating. So obviously there's only one line there, but if I wanted to make that as big as I want, I could. The button 1 text, button 2 text is the other one. So button 2 is, you can either bring it up with just the -2 as the shortcut, and that puts in a cancel button by default. And if we have a look at the exit code of that, cancel. So it'll exit with exit code 2 if you hit that. Obviously, if you hit the primary button, that exits with exit code 0, so that's how you can detect which button was clicked. And there is a third button, which is a info button. So I've got the setup as more info, and it will exit with exit code 3. So that's the 3 buttons you can sort of detect, so you can check the exit code, you can see what it's doing. The more info button has got a secondary function, which is called info button action. And you can configure that so that it will actually execute that action without quitting the dialog. So if we go info button, and we can go to MDOYVR24, is that the website?
Yep.
So if I click that, then it'll open up.
Oh my goodness.
Look at that. But it'll do that and it'll leave the window open. So I can hit that all day and it'll just open up the website. You can, if you wanted to, you can have that action there, and then you can also say quit on info. So if you have quit on info there, then when you click that, it'll open that up, but it'll actually quit the dialog at the same time. So you can have it take an action and then get out, or you can have it take the action and stick around. And if you wanted to be really annoying, we can have it do that and then stay on top of the window. And if you really want it to be really, really annoying, we can go blur screen. So this is where sort of like, you have the power to do whatever you want. Not all the decisions are sort of sane. So I can click that and it'll go to the website, but it's not going to quit, and it's just going to, everything's hidden behind a blur screen. So maybe that's useful in a workflow, I don't know, but the power is yours. So that's buttons. So at the moment, I've only got 3 buttons. They've had a few requests for people to add multiple buttons. I'm sort of not motivated to do that. I think 3 buttons is a lot. And if you really want to have more stuff, you can actually, we're using Markdown, right? So you can just put in like a link in the Markdown document. So you can link to things that way. This is more of I've sort of designed this as a, you want to pop up and show someone something and then take an action based on what they did. So the actual original use case for this was it was a notification we needed to send out for telling people to update their emergency contact details. Someone might see it pop up and we just wanted to check to see if they went, oh, okay, well, I've clicked the button, I've gone to the website and updated my thing, or I've just dismissed it. I really didn't care if you did the thing, we just cared what button you clicked. So that's the original use case for that. There's a couple of different ways you can format the buttons. Obviously the button types there, button behavior, we saw the action of that, the return codes. There's actually there's 2 extra ways to display them. So if you have, I think if we go, get rid of that. Oh. What do I call it? Help. This. Is it button style? It is button style. So button style. So we can have buttons centered. So if we center the buttons, then we'll get, it only does the button 1 and button 2. Info button doesn't get centered. It doesn't even display in center style. And 2.5 now has a new option called stack, so it'll actually stack the buttons one on top of the other. So how does that look? So even I don't know what all the commands are. I've got to go to help all the time, so that's why I write the help. Button style, stack. So yeah, so it's going to stack the buttons and it actually spreads the width along the whole thing. That's more useful if you have a style slightly smaller window. Oh, actually no, I don't want that. I want, yeah, anyway, if you have a smaller window, width, something like that. So yeah, so you can have a, don't worry about the formatting, but so we've got a stack style, so one on top of the other like that, and the other style is, hey, I didn't turn on, so centered style, so which will center the buttons on the window. So if you didn't have a really big long message like that, you could just have like an OK and cancel in the middle of a dialogue. But yeah, info button doesn't show up in that view, just FYI. Let's go on to focus mode. So yeah, buttons and return codes, went through those. What are we coming up to? So icon just takes any standard image format and it will try and display it as best as it can. Pretty much if it's an image format, it should be able to display it. If macOS can display it as an image, then this will display it. You can also pass in a URL to an image resource. You can pass in the path to an application bundle and it'll extract the application bundle icon and use that instead. You can position it on the screen. There's two positions, so one is on the side like that and the other one is you can have it centered underneath the title. Let's give you a quick demo of that. Oh. What's a good icon? Do we have a resource on here that I can pinch? No. Maybe not. Okay, I'll just use an app bundle. I thought there might have been a nice image I could drag from there, but yeah, application Firefox. So it'll just go and grab the image from the app bundle if you pass it in a bundle name. And you can center it as well. So what do I call it? Button position, I think it is. So you can have it centered. There's also a overall style where we can, so style centered, it's not doing anything special other than just predefining a layout. So you can actually do this layout with commands, but rather than sort of do that, we can just say centered. So that just gives you an idea of what the button in the middle looks like. Sorry, icon in the middle. So yeah, so icon pulls all images. Images works exactly the same as an icon, except it displays it bigger and in the message area. You can display multiple of them, so you can pass in 5 or 6 or 7 images, and it will display a little button so you can skip through them, and then you can also do autoplay, so you can auto rotate through a set of images if you want. yeah, app icons, I talked about that. Oh yeah, SF symbols. So for the icon we can do, instead of passing in a path to an image, you can do a SF equals and then the name of an SF symbol. So anything that's in the SF symbols for the current version of macOS will work fine. So in Sonoma, that is SF symbols 5, I think. So yeah, so go download the version of the F symbols app for your particular version of macOS. And we can also do, so with FF symbols we can do color, we can do palette colors if we want, we can do auto, and then if it's an animated symbol we can also animate it. So a good one for this one, which I like, is the rainbow. So icon, and its context is just this FF equals rainbow, and then it'll pop up the FF symbol for the rainbow. If we don't like that, we can go color equals auto. So rainbow's a nice one because it's got lots of multiple colors. So it's got multiple colors, so it'll actually display all the colors that are defaulted for that. You can actually, if you wanted to, you could pass in a different color and we'll just display it as that color. And I think if we go, I can't remember what the syntax is, it is help and pull up the help icon. So it is animation equals. Animation equals, what do we want to do? Variable. And then it will display using the variable animation for that symbol. Not all symbols have color defaults, not all symbols have animations. I'm really keen to have a play with the new animations that have come out with the new SF symbols for Sequoia, so it looks pretty cool. They've got some nice sort of like breathe animations and pulsing ones and stuff like that. So that looks fun. So if you're into animations, you can do that stuff with SF symbols. It's pretty cool. Size, position, and visibility. So again, size, we can resize the icon as we like. Position, we saw centered. If you pass in the icon with there's two commands. One is hide icon, which is its own separate command, or you can just pass in none as a keyword, and it will not display the icon at all. So if you don't want to have an icon there, you can just do icon none, and it won't say anything at all. Overlay works exactly the same as icon, so everything is supported in icon is supported in overlay. An overlay icon just displays an additional icon on the bottom right of the current one. So if we go like that, overlay icon, overlay? I can never remember the long one. Y is the short one. So yeah, so we can do an overlay icon just in the bottom corner. Supports all the same things, so SF symbols and images and stuff like that. If you do use an SF symbol, it will, because symbols are sort of like a bit of a weird shape, or some of them are, they're not all square. So what I do is actually render a background layer to place the SF symbol on top of. And there's a command there. If you don't want to have that background layer there, you can actually remove it. So that should be described in the help. Timers, what do we got? Timer, window, size, position. Timer's pretty simple. Dialog, timer. By default, it just sticks up a 10-second timer, and then when it's finished, it exits out. It's got its own exit code, so you can actually detect whether this exited with the timer, like that. If you wanted to, you could put in like a really long, and it will sit there and it'll try and count down however many hours that is, 11. if you put in button 1 text, then you'll get a timer, and for the first 3 seconds the button will be disabled, and then it will enable the button. And then if you click that, then you'll get the Xcode 0. If you let timer exit, you'll get the different Xcode for the timer, so you can do that. So yeah, that's pretty much the basics of timer. There's not much to go about that. The window itself, there's a few controls you can do with the window. We've got the size, so you can have width and height arguments for the window size. They are in points, so if you're on a non-retina display, then it'll display as a actual pixel size, so 500 is 500 pixels. If you're on a retina display, then that will come up as 1,000 actual pixels. So it displays in points. You can also put in a percentage, so you can say 50% for both width and height, and it'll display the window as a 50% of whatever the display it's running on. So you can do that. There's also a couple of new controls where demonstrated before. So one is resizable, and that means you can resize the window as you see fit. With that, the way macOS renders windows, it'll remember where the last window was. So when we're running in a non-resizable window, it will adhere to whatever size you specify. If you have a resizable window, what it does is it actually creates window dimensions of infinity, and it just remembers whatever the last size of that window was and displays it that way. So if you're displaying multiple dialogues and someone gets the window and makes it really small, the next resizable window will actually have that size. So just remember that. Position. We can position the window across all the sort of cardinal points around the screen. So center. Default position is slightly just north of center, but we can have exact center or top left, top right, bottom, so all around the screen. So we can position the window around the screen. There is also a argument position offset. So the default offset, I think, is I've got 16 pixels just as a border around the screen. So you can offset it, by 0 or 100 or whatever it is if you like. So, for example, if you go dialog, position top, it'll display the window at the top. If we go position offset and change it to 50, so now it's still displaying at the top, but the position has changed a little bit. So that's position really. Movable is an option, so by default dialog windows you can't click them and drag them around. I think so I can't pick it up and move it around. But if you stick in the movable, or just O, then I can pick that window up and I can move it around the screen. So if you want a movable window, or if you want to lock it to the screen, you can do that. Window priority, by default, it'll just display as a standard window, so someone can open up another window and it'll disappear behind other windows. There's an argument on top, so you can actually tell it to say it's always going to appear on the screen. So P is just the command line for that, so now I can be doing other stuff and this window always displays on top. So it's a good way to force things into people's faces if that's what you want to do. The ultimate way of doing that, which I demonstrated before, is the blur screen, which will blur the background layer and place everything on top. In this mode, you can actually run multiple dialogues and they'll all appear above the blur layer. So you can run a background dialogue doing nothing but displaying this blur screen, and the example that I've got on my scripts repo is a sort of a background layer with a progress bar at the bottom, and then all my processing appears on top. So it sort of appears as a coherent sort of application. In reality, it's just running multiple dialogues over the top of itself. So blur screen, I just showed you that. Full screen is probably, I don't think it's changed since version 1. But it it is what it says on the tin. It's just a version of Dialog that displays on a full screen. So you can pop that up. There's no buttons there that you can see, but they do exist. So if I just hit the default enter key there, it actually clicks the button. If I click somewhere else on the screen, that button then becomes defocused, and now I can't click it. But I can Command Q out of it. So I sort of made it, one of my pet peeves with some sort of workflows is getting the display into a state where you can't dismiss whatever the thing is that's blocking you from fixing or changing the thing you want to do. So I sort of intentionally made it easy for Dialog windows that are displaying it either full screen or blur screen to be able to quit. Now by default, obviously Command Q will work for that. You can, if you wanted to, change the quit key to something else. So, for example, T. So now if I Command Q, it won't work, but if I Command T, it will. And it actually works if you use it like for capital T, then Command T won't work either, but if I do a Command Shift T capital, then that works. So you can hide away the ability for the user to sort of exit a process or dialog if you want to, but you still have the ability to go in there and quit out of it if you need to, or do whatever you want to do. Just on that, with the new debug mode in 2.5, I actually display whatever the current command quit key is up there, and we also chuck up the current sort of window and icon sort of stuff. So this is more for you know, when you're sort of designing a layout to make it look good. You can use those to sort of help. We can do stuff like if we make it resizable, then if I want to change my size to you know, fit the content, then it'll actually report up in the top there to actually say what the current window dimensions are. So if you find something you like and you go, great, well that's how I want that window to look, then you can just pull off the actual dimensions of that window up the top there. And as you can see with debug, we're pumping some more info out onto the screen. So this is all coming out onto standard error in the terminal. So anyway, so it's full screen. Buttons resizability. I showed you resizability. Probably noticed by now that none of the windows have have window buttons on them. Let's just go all the way back to there. So we don't have the normal window controls up the top there. We can add those in. So if you wanted to make it look like an actual macOS dialog and not make it look like someone's trying to scam you, then you can pop those up in there. This is not a resizable window, so I don't get the full screen capability. But if I was to use a resizable window, then you do get that. So you can, if you want to, full screen it. It just sort of maximizes to the display. So that's buttons and resizability. Hotkey modifications, I showed you that before. So that's just adding a quit key, so you can add the custom quit key. And that's the demo. All right. Other customizations. So as predicted, they've sort of like, time is ticking away faster than I can talk. So we'll just go quickly through the extra customization. So what I showed you before is really kind of like the basic, you know, throw a message in front of the user, have them click a button, and then you record what happened. All right. So that's pretty much that's version 1 of swiftDialog. Is all that. So this is all about what other information you can provide, what other things you can do, system notifications and things like that. So additional info. Additional info is an area, so underneath the icon is an extra sort of display area. So we can go info box is what I called it. And I'm just going to be lazy and just drag. This is probably going to look like, we'll see what happens when we put a really big MD in there. So as you can see, it's just a little bit of content. It will cut it off, so see how you go with your content sizes. But yeah, so this whole area down the side here, so this is like just an extra info area. It supports all the standard markdown. It displays it in a slightly less prominent font color, so it's using the secondary font color, and in a smaller size than the rest of it. But it does support all the standard same markdown as message area. So that's the additional info. Banner image. So if you supply banner image, it'll display banner image along the top of the screen instead of the title. Well, actually, not instead of the title. Above the title. So banner image. I think I was lazy and I didn't do a. We'll go blob. So banner image puts a bin image on the title. So what it says on the tin. Banner image also has a, if you wanted to, you can go banner title, and it'll put the title, whatever title is, it'll overlay on top of the banner image. Now, by default, what I do here is instead of using the default font color, which will, if you're in light mode or dark mode, it will change the color of the font to match. Here, when I'm using banner image, it'll always change it to white. So if you're using a banner image, you do want to sort of throw in title font there and mess with the colors if you want to change the color. But it does actually give me, if I go title font, shadow equals 1. It'll put a little, I don't know if you can see it there, puts a little, zoom in. It puts a drop shadow underneath the text, so I don't know how well that shows up. But if I take that out, then you can sort of see there's no drop shadow there. So you can add a bit of a drop shadow to the title if you really wanted to. But that shadow equals 1, and obviously only works for the banner image. So banner title, info box, showed you that. Info text. Info text is, it will display a text in place of where button 3 normally goes. So info text. If you provide it with no argument, it'll just put in the current version of swiftDialog that you're running down the bottom there. Otherwise, it'll put in whatever text you want. So it's just a little info area. It's just another location to put some stuff. Help message. Help message is it will display markdown data or markdown document, formatted text, whatever, as a popover help message, and then it will display a little help icon next to the OK button. So instead of info box, if I go help message. So down the bottom here, I get the little question mark. So if I click on that, oh, okay. I need to put in actual markdown there, I guess. That might be a feature request that I can put in. So let's, instead of that, help message. Sure. All right, hang on. Keep hitting the wrong button. So, but yeah, it's just a little pop-over thing. Marked out formatted text. It doesn't. It's a non-scrollable area, so whatever you put in there needs to fit within the window. Although if you do put in a lot of content there, it'll actually display the popover bigger than the screen can display, so just be aware of that as well. Web content, probably skip over a lot of this, but web content, so you can pass in web content, pass in a URL. Oh, but great, I'll show it. Web content, and we go MDOYVR24.com, and it just displays a web view. Yes, you can click on these things and it will take you to all the other, it'll let you browse the web. So just be aware of that. But yeah, you can pass in web content. Obviously I passed in a URL then, you can just pass in a local HTML file if that's what you want to do as well. So that's web content. Video content, well, it's very much the same. So you can pass in a path to a local or a URL to a video file. You can also pass in video content has two sort of modifiers. One is YouTube ID and one is Vimeo ID. So you can pass in the ID tag for a YouTube ID into there and it will display the YouTube player. For displaying video, by default, when you just pull the video up, it'll just show the video with a play button in the middle, or you can pass in autoplay argument, and it'll then, when it loads up, it'll start auto-playing the video. So it's a good way to show video. Images, I think I mentioned that earlier before. So images, you can pass in multiple images, and it will display all the, either display one image, or if you pass in multiples, it'll display them as a carousel. And again, you can pass in argument autoplay, and then it will auto-rotate through that carousel. So autoplay, when using the image carousel, takes an argument which is the number of seconds. So by default, I think I've got it set to 5 seconds, or 5 or 10 seconds might be the default. But yeah, so you can have pass in 15 seconds, and then every 15 seconds it'll rotate to the next image. And then when it reaches the end, it'll just go and restart from the beginning. While it's doing that, it will display, so in older versions of swiftDialog, it used to display a progress bar down the bottom, counting down the number of seconds until the next image pops up. In 2.5, I've taken that out and I've replaced it instead with a little circular Pac-Man display thing in the top corner. So, do we want to see that, or are you happy with that? I'm happy to show it. Show it. All right. Videos was a bit. Oops, image. So if we go image, these are all going to look the same because they're just a whole bunch of wallpaper backgrounds. Oh, actually, we'll go that one. And then, what else can we do? I won't put in a Diego's cat. No, that's a PSD file. Vegemite. I'll put 2 images in, but we'll see how that goes. It helps if I can spell. So yeah, so I've just got 2 images here, and it gives me a little. Just for Nindy. I bought the jar. And Tim Tams. But yeah, if we go autoplay. What is it? Where's it auto? Where's my help? Help. Yeah, autoplay. Enable video autoplay. So this is another thing. If I go help and then any command, it'll bring up a Why does my autoplay not work? Do I need to put in seconds? Oh, I do too. I've got to put in seconds, okay. So I don't have a default, sorry. So yeah, autoplay in seconds, so you can see I've got a little countdown timer at the top there instead, and then it will fade into the next image. And then once that's finished, it'll rotate back to the original one. And, so once it goes back and forth. There you go, now you've seen that. Yay! I really thought I had a default for autoplay, but there you go. Images, notifications, so system notifications. We can do system notifications now, which is really great. A bunch of people nagged me to put it in. I was initially reluctant because there were other products that did that, and those are sort of being deprecated or being bought out by other people. So notifications work in it's like a, the dialog window won't actually pop up. I think if I go notification, we can have a title, hi. We can have message. So it's taking a standard title and message from the standard dialog. Obviously, font sizes and all sorts of stuff don't apply here, nor does markdown. And then it will send a system notification, which will not display here because I'm sharing my screen, but you'll see it pop up there. So it'll say, hi, this is a message. Yep, everyone's great. There is a subtitle option. This is cool. So the subtitle will show up. So it'll have title, top, subtitle, and then the rest of the message. It will actually expand the message to fill out if it needs to. So if you've got like a long message, you can have, I think, we normally get it up to about 6 lines worth, 5 to 6 lines worth. If you add in, and this is a bit of a weird quirk, I haven't worked out how to get it to do this with a default notification, but if you pass in an image as an argument, then it will, let's go with Vegemite again. Go with the theme. If you pass in an image, then what happens is nothing, because, oh no, sorry, I took that out because it's buggy. So what used to happen, if you're running 2.4, then when you pass in an image, it should display the image, but then you'll get like a little chevron to drop down to display the image, and if you do that, you actually get access to as big a message text as you want. I haven't found a way to do that for the default notification yet, so that's kind of like that's a bit weird. Just on the, actually on that, so image is not updating the image that you see in the notification. So for macOS notification, this picture that you get there is the application icon. Now on, just trying to think, when you do the install of swiftDialog, there is a post-install script. So inside the app bundle is a script, I think it's called icon changer or something like that, file icon, which is a bash script that will update the application, update an application to whatever the icon is. So I've got that in there. So if you have in system application support dialog folder, in there, if you put in an image called dialog.png with a capital D, then when you do the install, what it will do, it will pick up that application icon, it will pick up that image, and it will apply that to itself and make that the application icon. And that way you can brand dialog notifications to whatever your organisational dialog wants to be. So you can put your sort of branding on it. That works, you'll probably notice if you've run swiftDialog before, then that won't change anything initially. After a reboot, or if you kill Notification Center, then it will reload those assets, and then it will sort of it'll show the icon. So I've got some examples on. Everything is documented. Everything's documented. So some examples down here. So if we have a look at system notifications, then you can. That's an example of the expanded text. So this is the documentation for updating that. So we put in our dialog icon into the dialog folder, and then when we launch it, we'll get our custom icon there. So branding, that's a thing. You can do that with this. The other thing with notifications now in 2.5, which just released, is now notification actions. So you can add in a notification action and actually have it do a thing. And you get 2 buttons, so you can have button 1 action, button 2 action, and you can have those actions do something. So we can have it, where's my terminal window? Button 1 action. I'm just going to use MDO. Is that right? Right, so if that pops up, then when I click it, then it will actually open that up. So by default, if I've only got 1 action, then it will, the whole entire notification acts as a button. If I add in button 2 action, go away. I don't know what. Do I need to actually, oh no, button 2, not action, sorry. Button 2 title. We'll just call it cancel for now. So when we pull it up, I'm still going to open that. Where's my notification stuff? It's very, very new, so I'm still trying to learn it. Setting in action. So button 1 action, notification, blah, blah, blah. Oh, button 2 text. All right. Like I said, I'm forgetful. I always refer to my own. Button 2 text. Cancel. And we can, if you want to go 1 text. Okay. Something like that. And then what we should see is those will come up here as drop-downs. So we can have notification actions, and we can have buttons, and we can actually do something based on those. So if I hit cancel, it just goes away and doesn't do anything. So there we go. There's full notifications support now is in swiftDialog 2.5.
Are those actions logged in that error code? Do they cancel out from the notification window?
Yes, so the question was, are those actions logged and can you do anything with them? The answer is no-ish. So with this standard dialog, it's sort of running in the foreground, and when you dismiss it, then that's an action that's been taken by the user. When we're running a system notification, essentially what we're doing is we're taking, so all that information I'm piping in, I'm actually just telling macOS, display this notification, and so what it does is it just sends that to macOS. macOS will display that whenever it feels ready to do that, and then everything, and then goes away. So it unloads, so swiftDialog's not running, and then system notification goes to the system. The user can click that whenever they feel ready to, so I could let that sit there for days, right? And it's not going to do anything. It's just going to sit there in Notification Center. When I do finally click it, I'm actually taking, that sends a message to the swiftDialog application to process that notification. So that's where I can pick it up and process the actions, but that's not anything that sort of can process a return code or anything like that. So when you're sending a system notification, you essentially have to treat it like you're sending it out in the blind. And so you would have to set up your actions based on what you want to have happen. So, but essentially you're sending it out there and you're just hoping the user clicks it eventually, maybe one day. If you're interested in getting what the user did as a response, then that's where you'd probably go for like a full dialog window workflow for that. So yeah, system notifications are a way to shoot a message to the user and then go away and go do something else and let them deal with it in their own time. So it's not really something you sort of react to. You could probably work around it. Obviously, you can add something into the actions. So you can say, well, I sent the notification, so I've got a record of that. And I can tell when you clicked that URL link because I've put in something in there in the post, to record that, so-and-so's clicked something or whatever it is. So you can kind of get some stats that way, but it's really not you click the cancel button, now I need to tell you to go do something else. So it's kind of not that workflow. Does that answer? Yep, cool. How are we going for time? It's 11:30. Simple notifications, actionable notifications, saw those. Config profile, so obviously it's, you probably want to throw in a config profile to pre-approve swiftDialog for notifications. That is listed on the website. So there's a sort of example payload there. I need to update it because that's not the bundle identifier anymore. It is that. So that is the current bundle ID for swiftDialog 2. You can load in both bundle IDs if you're running an old version or a new version. It sort of doesn't really matter. But yeah, you probably want to pre-approve your notifications so users are forced to do it. And there's the demo. All right, data entry. This is where we sort of throw in text boxes and text fields and forms and stuff like that. We'll try and breeze through this a little bit. So I actually got some demo code this time. So if we have a look at, get rid of that, get rid of that. Which one's this? So what I will show is just the basics at the moment. So dialog, text field, enter in something. All right, so text field, enter in something, you type something in, they hit OK, and then it spits that out to standard out. So this is the format I was telling you before, where it's just got the field name and then whatever the value was of that field. You can instead use a JSON flag, and then it will output as JSON instead. So you can take your input or output however you like. If you think that sort of filtering by the free-form text that you've typed in, so rather than say, entering something, which is a nice sort of human-readable thing, you can go name equals field 1. All right, so it still says enter in something, and I can type in whatever I want, and then when I hit OK, instead it comes up as the name now is now field 1 instead of thing. So it's a little bit more, back-end sort of, code-friendly way of dealing with multiple fields. It has no qualms, by the way, with doing that multiple times. So I can put another text field in. Text field. Another. Second one. And then I can go name equals And if I wasn't paying attention, and I put in field 1 there as well, so it'll happily display both, and I can put text into both, but it'll happily just go, well, yeah. So just be aware of that. I think if I take out JSON, it gets even cooler because it'll display both on there. So if you're grepping for field 1, then you're going to get 2 lines worth of stuff. So just make sure that if you are using sort of like a incremental value in your field name, that you just sort of make sure you don't using it multiple times. That's part of the joy of being an admin, is the onus is on you to do the right thing. So yeah, so that's text fields. We have checkboxes as well. And I'm going to use start using JSON stuff here. So if I go, why did I put it in the middle there? Oh, damn it. You know what I could have done is I could have just deleted the JSON file and just moved that front, but anyway, it doesn't matter. JSON file, and then pull in some JSON. So this is just a blob, which is very small. Can I increase the size of that? No, I can't. Oh well. So yeah, I'm just defining a checkbox array here with a bunch of labels and some default values. So I'm setting whether it's enabled or disabled or not, whether it's already set to true or false, that kind of thing. And the window's too small for that. All right. So checkboxes obviously are checkboxes, so we can select one or more. This kind of demonstrates that we can have checkboxes that are already checked and disabled. So that might be something where you might want to throw them up and say these are defaults and they're already checked for you, or disable it and not let them check it, that kind of stuff. And the output again will come out like that with the standard output. Or as a blob of JSON. Checkboxes also have the name value, so you can also put in a name and have a more sort of programmer-friendly name as well. And there is also a checkbox style. And if we go switch, then it changes it to a switch style. And the switch style is pretty cool because it will actually display in a scrollable list. So checkboxes by default are sort of anchored to the window, but I'm sort of following the Apple HIG here, and they have scrollable switch display. So we can go in here and turn stuff on or off, and they behave exactly the same as checkboxes. So you can use a switch style as well. So that's data return formats. I've shown you that. Standard output, JSON, text fields, basic stuff. Just going back on text fields, these are all the options you get. So secure pops it up as a password type prompt. Required means that you have to type something in order to dismiss the dialog. Otherwise, it'll pop up an error saying you have to type something in. Prompt puts in a little bit of grey text in the field, so it'll actually prompt you to say, if you want to put in a prompt, please here enter your whatever. Regex or regex, however you want to pronounce it, will mean that the field has to match that regex in order to succeed. Regex error is a little thing. By default, if you put in a regex and nothing else, it'll just say this field doesn't match the format. You can customize that message with regex error, so the format can actually say, you need to enter in the fields, blah, 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 with this format and all sorts of stuff. Editor is a text field, but in a multi-line text editor box, so you can have a sort of a bigger sort of field area. File select lets you select files from Finder, and file type lets you define a file type. So you can put in, say, a file select with the type PNG to, say, upload an image, or a type zip to upload a zip file, or whatever. You can mix and match any of these. So you can have a secure field that is required with a prompt that has a regex, and go with that. So, and obviously one there's not mentioned at the moment is the new field, which is name. So you can have a name as well. So they're all the cool options you can have. Checkbox I showed you with the switch style. Drop downs, not really a great, I haven't really worked out a great name. Internally they're called pickers. I didn't want to call it picker in the thing because it sounds a bit weird. Picture of a nose or something. So I just called them drop downs. But that's a, pick a list and then that kind of thing. Drop downs have a second option, type, which is a radio button. So if you have a drop down with, say, like 2 or 3 values in it, then you can also, rather than have it as a drop down list, you can display it as a list of radio buttons. So we can go select, what do I call it? Help, less. Select title, select values, and select default. So I'll show you how these work. So if we go select title, select something, select values, one, two, three. Now if I just run it like that, then obviously there's no default selected, so it automatically puts in a blank one for you. But we can do select default, and you just type in the value, whatever it matches the actual item in that in the thing, and so it'll automatically select that one for you. And you can see here it doesn't have the null value at the top. So when you put in a default, it always means you have to have at least something selected. So the other one was, if I look at the help again, look for radio, so it's in the select title. Let me go comma radio. Oh, because I still had to help. So yeah, so now instead of displaying as a drop-down box, we're now displaying as a radio buttons. So there, again, it honoured the select default there. If I remove that, then because the way radio buttons work, you always have to have something selected. And so if you don't select the default, it'll automatically select the first one for you. So it's another way to sort of display that sort of info. And if we go back to this one, if you don't have a default selected, then you can put in a required field. So it will actually, this is how required works. It'll say select something as required. So, and that's how required works. So that's select radio buttons. I'll show you that. That's the demo. Command file. How are we going for time? It's 11:45. What time am I going until?
You got until 12:30. Definitely show the command file.
You want to break for lunch? All right, very good. So the command file.
Okay.
Command file.
Whatever you want.
Command file is all about code that I ripped off from Joel Rennick. Actually, I didn't really rip it off. He provided it for me. So thank you, Joel, for that. But yeah, the command file is, so whenever you launch swiftDialog, it will always sit there listening to a particular file path. By default, that's going to be /var/temp tmp/dialog.log. And it will sit there listening to that file, waiting for commands to pop up. If you're used to DP notify, It's a very similar type of command structure, although I've sort of expanded it out to do a few more things. But yeah, we can sort of show how that works. So sending commands is pretty easy. So if we launch a dialog, and we'll just pop it up here. Oh, hang on, make it movable. All right, so we'll pop that up there. So standard commands, it is literally, you can just echo and then whatever the command is. So if I want to update the title, we go title and then new title. And then we just pipe that through to dialog.log. And then it updates the title. And then similarly, we can do the same thing with message. All right, new message, and anything else as well. So we can update the icon. Again, you can pass in a path, whatever it is, or we can just go. I always pick on Firefox, I don't know why. But. All right, so you can just update, anything there that's sort of like pretty much everything that you can see on a dialog is updatable. So you can send other commands to it. Behind the scenes, it's actually working like, this is a beta alpha kind of feature that I added in, mostly for debugging this sort of workflow. But if we run this command called builder, then we get a couple of windows, and this is so this is using, behind the scenes, it's using the exact same sort of process for updating this kind of stuff. So all these things that sort of, we can sort of play with, they're all using that sort of command processing thing in the background. Probably the most common way that you probably want to use sort of the command file for is updating like a progress bar. Like you've got a if we go dialog and then and then we'll add a progress bar in. So that'll add an indeterminate progress bar to that. Oh, I didn't do it. No, that's right. Let's do a new window. All right. So if we add a echo, and there's progress has got a couple of commands. So the first one is increment. So if we go increment, then what it does, it'll take the progress value, which by default is 100. You can put in any other number after progress. So if you've got a thing that's 50 things long, you can do that. The other thing with progress, because it's a float value, you can actually put in like a progress of 1 and then pass in a value of 0.01, and it will increment it by that amount. So you can do fractional increments, it's not a problem. So the standard one, so progress increment will increment by 1. You can also do an actual sort of increment value. So we can say increment to 20, and it'll go to the 20 mark. So when you're incrementing in one direction, you'll see it actually does a bit of a smooth animation to go to the new value. If you go to a lesser value, it'll just jump straight to that. So the other thing we can do is, instead of say progress, we can go activate. So at the moment, you can see it's sitting in the background there. So if we go activate, bring the window to the front. So we can do stuff like that. Progress, we go back to progress. We can also go complete. So complete just is a increment value to whatever the progress state you've got it to. And then the last one is reset, which will reset it back to an indeterminate progress bar. So yeah, so with this workflow, generally you've got a dialogue running in the foreground somewhere and you've got your script running in the background doing a thing. Some really good examples of that are Dan Snelson's Set Up Your Mac, or Trevor Sisok's Baseline. So they're kind of the workflows that really sort of take advantage of this kind of stuff. So if you want to have a look at some apps that sort of work that way, then absolutely. So unique names. So I've been sort of piping stuff up to this dialog.log file. You probably don't want to do that in practice. You want to go use the command file key, and then you can call it something else. So, you know, you can put in any name you want. Generally what you might want to do is like do a make temp, do a log file, and then so each dialog instance that launches up has its own command file. When dialog launches, one of the first things it does is it cleans out any existing command file that might have existed. So that shouldn't be a problem for most cases, but you can get into a situation where a previous command file exists that, say, has a root privilege on it, and then you launch a dialog that has a user process on it, and it doesn't have access to remove or delete any of the content there. And so what it will then do, it'll go through and happily read through that file line by line, and if the last line in that command file is a quit command, then it'll just exit, and you won't see anything pop up. So there's been a few people sort of comment and say that how come this isn't working? Every time I run it, it just quits straight away, and it turns out they just had like an old command file sitting there that the system couldn't get rid of, and this was happily reading it and just quitting itself. So yeah, so you want to use custom command files, and then do not disturb it. Very good. So then when we're sending our commands, instead of sending to the default one, we can send it to our custom one instead. So that way you can have multiple dialogues all running all at once, all being updated by the various processes, and they're not conflicting with each other. So yes, unique names. Lists. Lists are a if we go dialog, resizable. Come on, drag properly. So lists are these things. So this is a very simple one. So obviously we've got just a list of items. Each one has a title. You can have a status icon. There's actually another one, status text. And in the current version, it's not in this particular one, but you can also have an icon, which can be an image or an SF symbol on this side. And you can have a subtitle. So you can actually get quite sort of complex with the sort of the way lists are. But what you can do with these, with the command file, is obviously we can change the status icon. So at the moment we've got some built-in ones. So we've got pending, wait, success. There's also error and warning, I think. And there is another one which is actually a status called progress. And the progress status will show a circular progress bar. And so you can have an item which is showing some sort of workflows going on in the background. So you can say we're waiting on this thing, and you can actually show a progress bar to show that that thing is actually continuing, and then when it's done you can change the status for it. You can get as complex as you want with this kind of thing. But if we have a look at, should have in the wiki, I think I've got a screenshot. So that's sort of like an example of the So that's an example of just sort of showing sort of like an icon, name, a bit of a status text, and then some progress in the background. So, and we're just seeing those commands in through the command file, so we can add in, so the command is generally the list name. and the action you want to take on it. So you're just updating a progress or you're changing a status to something else. But yes, that's all documented in there. Another good example of that is set up your Mac. So do I have a copy of set up your Mac here? I wonder. No, I don't. Let's get a copy. So the other thing I found interesting, if I type in set up your Mac into Google, go to Google, don't search for it, set up your Mac. So if I Google that, it actually comes up with the GitHub thing for set up your Mac first before Apple's support set up your Mac. So I don't know if that's going to start causing problems or not, but yeah, we'll deal with that when it comes about. So set up your Mac. Dan Snelson wrote it. It's a nice little bash script that has been written as a sort of like an onboarding workflow. I like to use an example because he pretty much uses every single feature that exists is sort of in here. So as soon as I sort of release something new, he's already writing something to make it work and do the thing. But it's got this great, if I just run it as is, it'll run in demo mode. So you'll see some like red text and all sort of stuff pop up, but that's part of the demo code. So if we go sudo bash downloads setup, I can't remember what it's called. No, not setup manager, that's something else. Set up your Mac. Dialog. .bash. We'll go with that. So if we run this, so he's going to be doing a bunch of stuff. So he's got a good example of the forms here. This in the info area, you can see, you might be able to see it, the clock's ticking down there. So we're actually running in the background there. We're running a network information. So while I'm filling in the form and stuff like that, we can go Bart, we can go whatever, I don't care about buildings and stuff like that. We must have a really slow connection there because the connection testing normally pops up by now, but here we go. It couldn't even figure it out. Thank you, EduRoam. Anyway, that would show you something. But then, so this is just the standard sort of like, oh, okay, we're setting stuff up form, that's fine. Then why is that complaining? 7. All right. And then he kicks off another thing, and this is sort of like an example of how the lists are working. So, you know, it's just sort of like running some stuff in the background. And as we're running each thing, we're updating the icon, we're updating the status down the bottom, we're updating the status text. We've got some things that failed, some things that didn't work. We've got some progress going on. And the button down the bottom is currently disabled until everything's finished, and then it gets enabled again. So that's kind of like the primo example of using pretty much every command line feature is that. So yeah, it's if you're into sort of looking at 5,000 line bash code, you know, jump in there and have a look. He's also got examples of using the help dialog with, you know, extra content and bits and pieces. Obviously, we've got some other formatting in there, but yeah. And that failed, but we're not going to restart because we're running in demo mode. So yeah, there are all the properties of lists. The progress bar, I've sort of given you an example of that. Undateable items, I think it's supposed to be updatable items, but anyway. We'll pretend that that's spelled correctly, and I was caffeinated when I wrote this. So yeah, so title, message, icon, buttons, info box, web content, video content. With updating, so you can display web content and then send an update to show another web page. There's currently a bug. If you just send a new page, that won't work. But if you send, essentially nullify the existing web content and then send in the command for the new content, then it will refresh and show the new one. So, and obviously the last one's activate, brings it to the forward, and then we can quit. And that's the demo. Extras, how are we for time? We're on 12 o'clock. So, Jamf helper mode. So Jamf helper mode is very early, sort of, because this is essentially my take on Jamf helper. What I wanted was something which I could take all my existing Jamf helper workflows and then just use them in this. So if you run the -JH argument, then every argument after that can be the Jamf helper argument syntax, and then it will do its best to try and display that in a swiftDialog dialog. So if you've got like Jamf helper workflows and you've got a lot of stuff, you don't want to rewrite all the commands to swiftDialog syntax, then you can just replace Jamf helper with dialog JH, and then it should work. Not everything gets converted over, but it does its best, especially if you're just using it for user dialogues. Builder mode, I showed you that before, so it's very much alpha state. It needs work. I haven't updated it since I first released it in version 2, so that's over a year ago now. So that's kind of like still on the to-dos to sort of fix out, but you can launch swiftDialog with all your configuration set up, then add in builder mode, and then it'll pop up that other window and you can tinker with stuff as is and sort of play with it. So you don't have to start with like a blank slate and try to build it. You can launch it with, if I go like that, and just add builder onto it. Then we get our list items there, but then, yeah, I can sort of, play with the content and everything here. So you can launch it with existing content, that's not a problem. Case studies, I showed you Sim. There's also on the wiki, if we go to swiftDialog 1, so on the showcase page, there's a whole bunch of stuff where it's been used. So we've got, so Armin's got a bunch of stuff, so it's built into Installer-Mator, so you can use swiftDialog for notifications or for install progress. So that was added in as a sort of stopgap, because when you're doing an installation through Jamf self-service and you click the install button, it just shows a spinning thing. If you want to actually show the progress of something downloading, and you're using Installer-Mator, then you can throw this in there, and what it'll do, it'll actually pop up a small window. It'll show a progress of the thing actually downloading, installing, and all that sort of stuff, rather than just seeing a spinning thing. So I'm sort of one for having more info to the user, so that's kind of like my thing. But other than that, yeah, there's a whole bunch of other stuff in there. So feel free to have a look. There's Dan's stuff. Adam Kadiga's got some stuff in there. And even, I think right down the bottom, I think we've even got Microsoft. They've got it listed on their page for deploying it using, if you're deploying Macs using Intune. So putting splash screens up and stuff like that. So that's a bit of like a, if you want to see examples of what other people are doing, anytime I see something really cool, I kind of put it up there. If you've got something cool, send it to me and I can happily link to it in there if you want me to. Jamf help builder, set up your Mac, baseline, renew, we've already spoken about that, but stuff that's out of date. I have a repo which is this one here. This is essentially, as I've got down here, where is it? Most of these will be demo quality. So this is just stuff where I'm like, here's an example of how this thing might work. How you might want to be able to do this, or here's something which demonstrates a particular feature. So one of those is the what I've called multi-dialog. And this is the one I was explaining before, where I've got one dialog window which is controlling a blurred screen and a progress down the bottom, and then I throw other stuff in front of it. So it kind of looks like this. So this sort of little window down the bottom with the progress, that's actually the dialog that's running in the background, and everything else sort of appears on top of that. So that way, the demonstration is that we can have multiple steps, multiple dialogues, but it all looks like one cohesive app, and we're not sort of like quitting a dialogue and then launching another one in front of Windows, or closing a blur screen and then reopening a blur screen, stuff like that. So, but yeah, that's scripts repo. That's linked to at the top of the swiftDialog channel in Slack. And I try to update it whenever I can. Obviously, some of these are not as updated as they could be, but again, they're mostly just designed as sort of demonstrations, examples, and sort of that kind of thing. So that's my stuff that is out of date. Support. All right. Now, it's on GitHub. So if you want to go and download it off GitHub, you can go do that. Sorry, yes. Support. We do have channel in MacAdmin Slack. I try to answer stuff in there whenever I can. Generally, somehow, regardless whatever time of day it is, either Adam Kadiga or Trevor get in there and are answering questions on my behalf. So if you get one of those guys answering, they play with this a lot more than what I do, actually, even though I write the thing, especially Trevor. So they're really knowledgeable. Whatever they say is probably correct. But yeah, there's a support channel in there. Otherwise, you can feature request or put issues in on GitHub. So if you have a GitHub account, please go in there. There's some templates there for doing feature requests and stuff like that. Slack, I mentioned, so MacAdmin Slack, swiftDialog channel. And it's 12:05, and so if there's any Q&A or if you want me to show anything, now's the time, or we can break early-ish.
No questions, let's break early.
I'm happy with that. I've been standing up for 2 hours, so. Yes, in the front.
One quick question, where is the configuration profile again on the support website?
Oh, right. So if we go to on the wiki, this is for what, for notifications?
Question? Repeat the question, Bart.
Oh, so the question was, where is the profile on?
The configuration profile basically like to allow swiftDialog to like
Yep.
spew out errors.
So if we go to, I can't remember this. swiftDialog. So if we go to the wiki, so the sidebar doesn't have everything in here, but it's got this. So in system notifications, and then on that page, just scroll down a bit, and then there is the approving setting notification type. So this is the only, swiftDialog generally doesn't have any other configuration to send out. So it's generally, the way I describe it is it's dumb, doesn't have any brains, like bring your own intelligence to this thing. But for, yeah, for system notifications, that's probably the only payload that we want to sort of deploy out. So yeah, so it's on the wiki, it's there. If you can't find it on that page, then you can obviously just drop down here, and then it'll probably pop under notifications down here as well. So there you go. Yes?
One more short question.
No.
No.
Is it possible to have a local HTML, and is it possible to play local video files?
Yes, so any content that I've shown in here can either come from a URL or it can be local. So whether it's an image or a HTML file or a video, so videos can be local. If macOS supports it as a video format, then it should play it, because I'm just using the built-in video player in SwiftUI. So far, pretty much anything that I've thrown at it works. So yeah, and that works with either standard or with autoplay. So you can point it to a local video file and just say autoplay, and then off you go. So I can probably, the only thing I've got, I think, a video at the moment is maybe a screen recording. But yes, you can try it out yourself. But yeah, it'll support local files. You get the microphone back.
Thank you, Bart.